man who spent his life portraying power, restraint, and quiet authority did not meet his end in the chaos of flashing cameras or the sterile luxury of a Hollywood mansion. Instead, Robert Duvall slipped away in the most fitting way imaginable, on a quiet Virginia farm, where the only sound was the wind brushing past open fields and the distant rhythm of horses grazing under a fading sky. On the evening of February 15, 2026, inside a centuries-old stone farmhouse nestled in Fauquier County, the world unknowingly paused. There were no reporters stationed outside, no carefully staged final moments, no entourage waiting to manage the narrative. Just a dimly lit room, a man at peace with his life, and Luciano Pedraza holding his hand as he took his final breath at the age of 95. It was not just a death, it was an ending written with the same quiet precision that defined his entire career. Within hours, the news spread across the globe. Networks replayed his most iconic scenes, critics revisited his legacy, and audiences were reminded of the depth he brought to every role. From the haunting stillness of Boo Radley in To Kill a Mockingbird to the composed brilliance of Tom Hagen in The Godfather, Duvall had built a career on subtlety, a rare kind of power that didn't demand attention, yet commanded it effortlessly. But as the world prepared for what it assumed would be a grand farewell, something unexpected happened inside the Duvall home. The family released a statement that felt almost out of place in modern celebrity culture. No funeral. No memorial service. No gathering of Hollywood elites dressed in black. Instead, they asked people to honor him in the simplest way possible: watch a great film, tell a meaningful story, or take a quiet drive through the countryside. It was a request that stopped people in their tracks, not because it was extravagant, but because it wasn't. And in that simplicity lay the truth of who Duvall really was. A man who spent decades avoiding the noise, who never allowed fame to redefine him, and who, even in death, refused to become a spectacle. Behind that quiet goodbye stood a life of extraordinary achievement. Over 7 decades, Duvall built a body of work that most actors could only dream of. He stood shoulder to shoulder with legends, shared scenes with icons, and earned the respect of generations. Directors like Francis Ford Coppola saw in him something rare early on, a performer who didn't just act, but inhabited silence itself. Fellow actors like Al Pacino called him a born actor, someone whose presence elevated every scene without ever trying to dominate it. Yet, for all his success, Duvall never played by Hollywood's rules. When offered a return to The Godfather Part 3, he walked away, not because he didn't value the role, but because he valued fairness more. Being paid significantly less than Pacino wasn't just a financial issue, it was a matter of principle. And so, he said no. That decision cost him millions, but it preserved something far more important to him: his sense of self. This pattern repeated throughout his life. When studios hesitated to fund The Apostle, Duvall didn't abandon the project. He invested his own money, risking millions to tell a story he believed in. It wasn't a safe move. It wasn't even a logical one. But it was honest, and that was always enough for him. Over time, those choices quietly built a fortune estimated between $50 and $70 million. Not through blockbuster paychecks alone, but through consistency, discipline, and an instinct for meaningful work. While others chased headlines, Duvall built something steady, film by film, decision by decision. But the most revealing chapter of his life wasn't written on a set. It was written on 360 acres of Virginia land. While Hollywood's biggest stars invested in mansions overlooking the ocean, Duvall turned inward, toward nature, toward stillness. His farm became his refuge, a place untouched by the pressures of the industry. There, he lived a life that felt almost disconnected from the fame he had earned. He rode horses, watched sunsets stretch endlessly across the horizon, and transformed a barn into a tango hall where music and movement replaced red carpets and premieres. And at the center of that life was Luciana. Their story began not on a film set or at an award ceremony, but in a bakery in Buenos Aires. A chance moment. A missed flower shop. A random decision that led him inside. And there she was, unaware of who he was, uninterested in his fame, simply present in the moment. It was the kind of meeting that feels too improbable to be real, yet somehow defines everything that follows. They shared the same birthday. They built a life rooted in simplicity, traveling between Argentina and Virginia, dancing tango, supporting charitable work through their foundation, and choosing privacy over publicity. Despite their deep bond, they never had children. It was a quiet absence in an otherwise full life. So when Duval passed, there were no traditional heirs waiting in the wings. No children to inherit the legacy. No family disputes brewing beneath the surface. Instead, everything, his wealth, his estate, his lifelong earnings, naturally flowed to the woman who had shared his final decades. And what's most remarkable is what didn't happen. There were no legal battles.
No contested wills.
No hidden claims or dramatic revelations. Just silence. A respectful, almost sacred silence that reflected the life he had lived. In an era where celebrity estates often unravel into chaos, Duval's remained intact, untouched by greed, untouched by conflict. Because in the end, the fortune was never the point. The real weight of his passing wasn't measured in dollars, but in absence. The empty chair at the farmhouse table. The quiet barn where tango music once played. The porch where he watched the sun dip behind the Blue Ridge Mountains. These were the things his family felt, not the loss of wealth, but the loss of presence. Duval once said he valued a letter from Marlon Brando more than his Oscar. That single statement reveals everything. In a world obsessed with recognition, he valued connection. In an industry built on illusion, he held on to what was real. And that is the legacy he left behind. Not awards. Not money. Not even the films, though they will endure for generations. But the proof that a man can live entirely on his own terms, reject the noise, walk away from millions, and still build something extraordinary. A life defined not by what the world expected, but by what he quietly chose, day after day. His family didn't cry because of what he left behind. They cried because someone irreplaceable was no longer there to share it.